In the heart of downtown Philadelphia, where glass towers kissed the clouds and designer suits brushed against worn denim, there stood a coffee shop that gleamed like a promise. The Brew Haven. Polished marble floors. Leather seats that whisper. Luxury. A place where a single cup cost more than some family spent on dinner. But on this particular Tuesday morning, something happened inside those pristine walls that would shatter illusions and reveal a truth so painful it would echo long after the last customer had gone home. Marcus Williams stood at the entrance, his reflection barely recognizable in the spotless glass doors. 52 years old, hands weathered from decades of work, wearing faded jeans with a small tear at the knee, and a plain gray t-shirt that had seen too many wash cycles. His shoes, once white sneakers, now carried the stains of city streets and honest labor. No one who passed him on the sidewalk would guess that this man owned 47 coffee shops, spanning from Boston to Atlanta. No one would imagine that the empire bearing his name generated millions each month. And that was exactly what he wanted. Because Marcus had learned something painful in his 20 years of business. He had learned that the world judges a book by its cover, and sometimes you need to remove that cover to see what's truly written on the pages beneath. He pushed open the door. The scent of roasted beans and vanilla syrup filled his lungs. Soft jazz played through invisible speakers. Behind the counter, 3 employees moved with practiced efficiency. 2 women and 1 young man, all wearing the signature burgundy aprons with the Brew Haven logo stitched in gold. Marcus watched them for a moment, his heart already heavy with what he suspected he might find. Because for 3 weeks, he had been receiving complaints. Not from strangers, not from casual customers, but from people who looked like him. People whose skin carried the same deep brown that his hair did. They spoke of cold shoulders and forgotten orders, of being watched like thieves while they waited for their coffee, of subtle slights that left no evidence but carved deep wounds nonetheless. So Marcus had come to see for himself, disguised as nothing more than a tired man seeking a morning cup of warmth. He approached the counter slowly, his footsteps quiet against the marble. The young man noticed him first, glanced up briefly, then looked away as if something more important had caught his attention. One of the women, blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her name tag reading Rachel, busied herself wiping down an already spotless espresso machine. The other woman, dark-skinned with kind eyes, was taking an order from a customer in an expensive suit. Marcus waited. 1 minute passed. Then 2. He watched as a couple walked in behind him, both white, both dressed in business casual attire. Rachel's head snapped up immediately, her smile blooming like flowers after rain. Good morning. Welcome to Brew Haven. What can I get started for you today? The couple ordered their drinks with the ease of people who had never questioned whether they belonged. Rachel laughed at something the man said, her fingers dancing across the register. The dark-skinned employee, whose name tag read Sarah, prepared the drinks with quiet focus. Marcus waited still, his heart beating steady but heavy. He had built this business from nothing, from a single food truck parked outside. A factory where he used to work double shifts. From dreams sketched on napkins and loans that nearly buried him. He had created jobs for hundreds. Had insisted on fair wages and health insurance when other businesses cut corners. Had written into every franchise agreement that discrimination of any kind would mean immediate termination of contract. And yet here he stood, invisible. Finally, Sarah finished with the couple's order and turned toward him. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Not of who he was, but of what they shared. She smiled, genuine and warm. I'm so sorry for the wait, sir. What can I get for you? Before Marcus could answer, Rachel's voice cut through the space like a blade. "Sarah, I'll handle this one. Why don't you go check if we need to restock the oat milk?" Sarah's smile faltered. She nodded, glancing once more at Marcus with something that looked like apology, and disappeared into the back room. Rachel turned to Marcus then, and the transformation was complete. The warmth that had radiated toward the previous customers vanished. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes, cold and assessing, traveled from his worn shoes to his gray t-shirt with obvious disdain. "What do you want?" The words landed like stones. Not "what can I get you?" Not "how can I help you?" "What do you want?" As if his presence was an inconvenience. As if he had wandered in from the street looking for handouts rather than service he was willing to pay for. Marcus kept his voice steady. "Just a medium black coffee, please." Rachel sighed, a sound loaded with irritation. She punched the order into the register with aggressive jabs of her manicured fingers. $6.50. Marcus reached for his wallet, but Rachel had already moved on, turning her back to prepare the drink. He waited, money in hand, watching as she moved with deliberate slowness. When she finally returned with his coffee, she set it on the counter with such force that liquid sloshed over the rim, spreading across the marble like spilled ink. "Here. It. Not here you go. Not enjoy. Just here." Marcus reached for the cup, and that's when he heard it. Rachel had turned to speak to the young male employee, thinking perhaps that Marcus had moved away that he couldn't hear. But her voice carried, sharp and clear and venomous. "We don't serve people like that here." Time stopped. The jazz playing overhead seemed to distort, becoming something discordant and strange. Marcus felt every muscle in his body tense, felt his throat tighten around words that wanted to explode from his chest. "We don't serve people like that here." 3 words that contained centuries of pain. 3 words that reduced him to nothing more than his appearance, his skin, his perceived poverty. 3 words that told him he was unwelcome in a place he had built with his own bleeding hands. The young man shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward Marcus as if suddenly aware that those words had been heard. Rachel continued arranging pastries in the display case, oblivious or uncaring. Marcus stood there, coffee growing cold in his hands, and felt something break inside him. Not anger, though that would come later. Not even shock, because deep down he had known what he would find. What he felt was grief. A profound, soul-deep grief for the world his children would inherit. For every person who had walked through these doors and been made to feel less than human. For the invisible violence that happened 1,000 times a day in spaces that claimed to welcome everyone. He thought about leaving. About walking out that door and never returning. About shutting this location down with a single phone call. But then he looked toward the back room, where Sarah had disappeared, and he thought about all of the Sarahs working in all the coffee shops across his empire. Good people trying to make a living, trying to serve with dignity, forced to witness cruelty they were powerless to stop. And Marcus realized that walking away would change nothing. The rot went deeper than one employee, one location. It lived in the assumptions people made before you even opened your mouth. In the way eyes traveled over you, and decided your worth based on fabric and skin. So Marcus did something else. He pulled out his phone. He pressed record. And he spoke, his voice carrying through the café with quiet authority. "Excuse me, Rachel." She turned, annoyance flashing across her face. "What?" Marcus held up his phone, the red recording light visible. "I'd like you to repeat what you just said. About the kind of people you serve here." The color drained from Rachel's face. Her eyes widened, darting to the camera, to Marcus. To the other customers who had begun to take notice. The young man stepped back, hands raised as if to distance himself from what was unfolding. I didn't mean. Marcus stepped closer to the counter, his voice still calm but carrying the weight of every indignity he'd ever swallowed. You said, and I quote, "We don't serve people like that here. I'd like to know what kind of person you think I am." Based on what? The way I'm dressed? The color of my skin? Please enlighten me. Enlighten everyone here. Rachel's mouth opened and closed, words failing her. Other customers had stopped mid-conversation, some pulling out their own phones, sensing that something significant was happening. The young male employee looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Do you know why I came here today? Marcus continued. Do you know that for 3 weeks I've been hearing stories? Stories from customers who felt watched, suspected, treated like criminals for the crime of existing in this space. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself that the company I built, the values I instilled, would be enough. That my employees would understand that every person who walks through that door deserves respect, deserves dignity. But I was wrong. He paused, letting the words settle. My name is Marcus Williams. I own this coffee shop. I own all 47 Brewhaven locations across 8 states. And I came here today dressed like this to see if the stories were true. To see if my own employees would look at me and decide I wasn't worth their time, wasn't worth their respect, simply because of how I appeared. The silence that followed was absolute. Rachel had gone completely white, tears beginning to stream down her face. The young man looked sick. Customers stared, some in shock, others nodding as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. Sarah emerged from the back room, drawn by the commotion, and when she saw Marcus standing there with his phone raised, understanding washed across her face. Marcus lowered his phone but didn't stop the recording. I need to tell you all something. A story that maybe will help you understand why this matters so much to me. Why I built this company in the first place. 23 years ago, I was working 3 jobs trying to support my family. Factory work during the day, cleaning office buildings at night, and on weekends, I worked at a coffee shop, not unlike this one. I was 29 years old. Exhausted. Barely sleeping. But I showed up every day with a smile because I was grateful for the work. One day, I was on my break, still in my uniform, and I walked into an upscale cafe to buy my mother a birthday gift, a nice pound of their specialty beans. She loved coffee. It was one of the few luxuries she allowed herself. His voice grew softer, carrying the ache of memory. The woman behind the counter took one look at me, at my stained uniform and tired eyes, and she laughed. She actually laughed. And said, "Honey, I don't think you can afford anything in here. Maybe try the convenience store down the street." I was so humiliated that I just left. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just walked out and sat in my car and cried like a child. That night, I went home, and I told my wife that someday I would open a place where everyone would be treated like they mattered. Where the man in the suit and the woman in work boots would receive the same smile, the same service, the same humanity. Marcus looked directly at Rachel. That's why Brewhaven exists. Not just to sell coffee, but to prove that business can be done differently. That profit doesn't require cruelty. That we can build something beautiful without tearing others down. But if my own employees don't understand that, if they walk around carrying the same prejudices that wounded me, then I fail. I failed my younger self. I failed every person who ever felt small in a place that should have made them feel welcome. The tears on Rachel's face fell faster now. She tried to speak, her voice breaking. "Mr. Williams, I am so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I've been stressed, And I didn't mean. Marcus raised a hand. Gently. I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you having a bad day or being stressed. This is about Sarah, who watched you treat me with contempt and had to swallow her own dignity to keep her job. This is about every customer who walked in here with hope and walked out carrying shame. This is about the young man over there who was too afraid to speak up, even though he knew what you were doing was wrong. When we discriminate, we don't just hurt one person. We poison the entire community. We teach others that it's acceptable. We pass on a sickness that has already infected too many generations. He turned to address the gathered customers, his voice rising with passion. I know some of you witnessed what happened here today. Some of you pulled out your phones and recorded it, and I'm grateful for that. Because this story needs to be told. Not to destroy anyone, but to illuminate a truth we too often ignore. We live in a world that still judges people by the wrapping instead of the gift inside. We see someone's clothes or skin or accent, and we make 1,000 assumptions in the space of a heartbeat. We decide who deserves our kindness and who doesn't, based on criteria so arbitrary and cruel that if we really examined them, we'd be ashamed of ourselves. His gaze swept across the café, meeting eyes, connecting with hearts. But here's what I want you to understand. Rachel isn't a monster. She's a human being who made a terrible choice, who let society's poison seep into her heart and come out through her words. The real monster is the system that taught her to think this way. The real monster is the culture that makes people believe their worth is tied to their appearance, their income, their race. And the only way we defeat that monster is by choosing differently. Every single day. In every interaction. In every moment when we're tempted to judge someone before we know their story. Marcus finally stopped recording and pocketed his phone. How? He looked at Rachel. Really looked at her. Seeing not just the employee who had wounded him, but a young woman who was probably terrified, probably replaying every choice that led to this moment. Rachel, I'm going to do something that might surprise you. I'm not going to fire you today. Her head snapped up, disbelief written across her tear-stained face. But I am going to require something from you. Starting tomorrow, you're going to attend our comprehensive diversity and inclusion training, not the quick version we usually do, but the full program. 2 full days. You're going to listen to stories from people whose experiences differ from yours. You're going to sit with the discomfort of recognizing your own biases. And you're going to write a letter, a real letter, to every customer who might have felt unwelcome because of your actions. It won't erase what happened, but it's a start. He turned to Sarah, who stood with her hand over her mouth, eyes glistening. And Sarah, I owe you an apology too. You shouldn't have been put in a position where you witnessed discrimination and felt powerless to stop it. That's on me. That's on the culture I clearly haven't built strongly enough. From now on, every Brewhaven employee will have the authority and the responsibility to speak up when they see injustice. No one should have to swallow their dignity for a paycheck. No one. Sarah nodded, wiping at her eyes. The young man finally found his voice, stepping forward. Mr. Williams, sir, I should have said something. When she spoke like that, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. You were scared. I understand. Fear keeps us silent more often than cruelty does. But now you know. Now you know that silence protects the aggressor, not the victim. Now you know that speaking up might be uncomfortable, but staying silent is unbearable. He stepped back, addressing everyone once more. I'm going to share what happened here today. Not to shame anyone, but because these conversations need to happen. We need to see these moments of failure so we can learn from them. We need to feel the discomfort so we're motivated to change. And we need to remember that behind every transaction, every interaction, is a human being with a story just as complex and painful and beautiful as our own. Marcus picked up his coffee, now cold, and took a sip anyway. The bitterness matched the moment perfectly. You know what hurts the most? It's not the insult itself. I've heard worse. I've survived worse. What hurts is knowing that somewhere right now, in another city, another coffee shop, another restaurant or store or bank, someone else is hearing those same three words. We don't serve people like that here. And they're feeling what I felt. That punch to the gut, that reminds you that no matter how hard you work, how much you achieve, how good a person you try to be, there will always be someone who looks at you and sees only what they want to see, only what they've been taught to see. He set the cup down gently. But I refuse to let that define my story. I refuse to let bitterness replace the hope that made me build this company in the first place. Because for every Rachel, there are 100 Sarahs. For every moment of cruelty, there are 1,000 moments of grace. For every door that closes, there are people fighting to pry it back open. And as long as I have breath in my body, I will be one of those people. I will build businesses that treat everyone with dignity. I will hire people who understand that diversity isn't just a buzzword, it's a necessity. I will tell my story over and over, until every person who's ever felt invisible knows they're seen. The cafe remained silent, but it was a different silence now. Not the heavy quiet of shame, but the profound hush of people absorbing truth, of minds being changed, of hearts cracking open just wide enough to let new light in. Marcus turned to leave, then paused at the door. He looked back one last time, his voice carrying across the space with gentle finality. I'll be back tomorrow. Not in disguise. Not to check up on you. But because this is my place too. Our place. A place where everyone, absolutely everyone, should feel welcome. Let's make sure that from now on they do. And he walked out into the bright morning, leaving behind a cafe full of people who would never forget what they had witnessed. Some would share their videos online, and by evening, the story would spread across social media like wildfire. News outlets would pick it up. Commentators would debate it. Some would praise Marcus for his grace. Others would argue he should have been harsher. But none of that mattered as much as what happened in the days and weeks that followed. Rachel did attend the training. She spent 2 full days listening to stories that shattered her assumptions and rebuilt her understanding of the world. She wrote those letters, pouring her regret onto pages that would reach people she'd never met, but had harmed nonetheless. She didn't become perfect overnight. No one does. But she became willing to grow. And that willingness was everything. Sarah was promoted to manager of the location, her authority formalized, and her voice empowered. She implemented new protocols, created safe spaces for difficult conversations, and became a mentor for other employees navigating similar challenges. The young man, whose name was David, started a discussion group for employees across all Brewhaven locations, a place where they could talk openly about bias, discrimination, and how to create truly inclusive environments. It grew into something powerful, spreading to other companies, inspiring other young people to speak up. And Marcus continued visiting his stores unannounced, sometimes in a suit, sometimes in jeans, always watching, always listening, always reminding himself that the work of building a better world is never finished. He established a foundation that provided grants to minority-owned businesses, particularly those in the food service industry. He spoke at conferences and schools, sharing his story not as a tale of personal triumph, but as a cautionary reminder that prejudice lives in the spaces we least expect it, thriving in the silence of good people who know better, but say nothing. But more than any of that, Marcus made sure that every single Brew Haven employee received training not just on how to make coffee, but on how to see people. Really see them. Beyond the clothes, beyond the skin, beyond all the superficial markers we use to divide ourselves into categories of worthy and unworthy. He taught them that serving someone a cup of coffee was never just about the transaction. It was about affirming their humanity. About saying with your actions, if not your words, you matter. You belong. You are seen. Because that's what Marcus learned on that Tuesday morning, when 3 words cut through him like broken glass. He learned that invisibility is its own kind of death. That being treated as less than human chips away at the soul in ways that don't heal easily. And he learned that the only antidote to that poison is radical kindness, intentional respect, the conscious decision to treat every person as if their story matters, because it does. Years would pass. The video from that day would resurface periodically on social media, sparking new conversations each time. Students would write papers about it. Diversity trainers would use it as a teaching tool. And through it all, Brew Haven would continue to grow, not just as a business, but as a movement. A living testament to the idea that how we treat each other in the smallest moments defines who we are in the largest sense. There's a plaque now in the original Philadelphia location, the one where everything changed. It doesn't tell the whole story. Plaques never can, but it captures the heart of it. The words are simple, carved into brushed bronze that catches the light from the windows. We serve everyone here. No exceptions. No excuses. Because every person carries a story we haven't heard yet, and every story deserves our respect. Marcus visits that plaque sometimes, running his fingers over the words, remembering the pain of being dismissed, the courage it took to speak up, the grace required to choose growth over revenge. And every time he stands there, he thinks about all the people who've walked through those doors since then. All the conversations that happened. All the moments when someone chose kindness over judgment. All the times a Sarah spoke up instead of staying silent. All the Rachels who confronted their biases before they could wound someone else. And he allows himself to hope. Not the naive hope that pretends everything is fixed, but the hard-earned hope that comes from knowing change is possible. That people can grow. That systems can improve. That the world his grandchildren inherit might be just a little bit softer than the one he was born into. If you're listening to this story right now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I want you to ask yourself something. When was the last time you judged someone by their appearance? When was the last time you made an assumption based on how someone looked, talked, or dressed? We all do it. Every single one of us has been Rachel at some point, has been the person who let prejudice guide our actions, even if only in our thoughts. The question isn't whether we've done it. The question is what we do next. Do we ignore it? Make excuses? Tell ourselves it doesn't matter because we didn't mean any harm? Or do we sit with the discomfort of recognizing our own capacity for cruelty and commit to doing better? Because that's all growth is. It's not perfection. It's not never making mistakes. It's choosing to learn from those mistakes instead of defending them. It's deciding that the temporary discomfort of examining our biases is worth it if it means one less person has to feel invisible. Marcus Williams didn't share his story to be a hero. He shared it to be a mirror, to reflect back to us the ways we wound each other without even realizing it. The ways we carry forward the prejudices of generations past, unless we consciously choose to put them down. The ways we contribute to systems of inequality by simply not questioning them, by going along with what's always been instead of imagining what could be. So let this story settle into your heart. Let it make you uncomfortable if that's what it takes. Let it challenge your assumptions about who deserves kindness and who doesn't. Because the truth is, everyone does. The person in the expensive suit and the person in worn-out shoes. The CEO and the janitor. The native-born and the immigrant. The person who looks like you and the person who doesn't. Everyone carries inside them a universe of experiences, a lifetime of joys and sorrows, hopes and fears. And none of us can see that universe unless we choose to look past the surface. 3 words almost defined that day. We don't serve people like that here. But instead, those 3 words became the catalyst for something larger. They became the spark that ignited a conversation. They became the wound that demanded healing. They became the reminder that our words carry power, and we must wield that power with care. If this story touched something inside you, if it made you think or feel or question, then share it. Share it not to shame anyone, but to continue the conversation Marcus started. Share it because someone in your life needs to hear it. Someone is carrying their own invisible wounds, wondering if they matter, wondering if they belong. Let them know they do. Let them know their story is seen. Let them know that slowly, painfully, stubbornly, we're learning to do better. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you're standing in line at a coffee shop or walking past someone on the street or meeting someone for the first time, you'll pause. You'll remember this story. You'll remember Marcus standing there with his cold coffee and his broken heart. You'll remember the choice we all face in every interaction: to diminish or to dignify, to judge or to embrace, to see only the surface or to recognize